It began with a single message that was never meant to leave palace walls. A quiet staff member inside Prince Edward's household allegedly risked everything to expose a shocking claim that Queen Camilla had quietly attempted to derail a major public event hosted by Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Within hours, whispers raced through royal corridors, aides scrambled behind closed doors, and a question began haunting the palace: why would Camilla try to sabotage Sophie's moment? At first, the message looked ordinary. A short communication passed between staff members, buried within the constant stream of logistical chatter that flows through the royal households every day. But according to insiders, the content of that message was anything but routine. Hidden within its careful wording was an allegation that immediately set alarm bells ringing inside Prince Edward's office. Something unusual had been happening in the days leading up to Sophie's highly anticipated charity event, something that didn't feel accidental. The staff member who allegedly uncovered the situation was not a senior royal advisor or a media strategist accustomed to palace intrigue. Instead, they were described as a quiet, diligent figure who worked within the background machinery of Edward's household, someone responsible for monitoring communications and ensuring that the complex schedules of the royal family ran smoothly. Yet what they reportedly noticed during preparations for Sophie's event began to trouble them more with each passing day. Sophie's charity event had been months in the making. It was not just another appearance on the royal calendar. The Duchess of Edinburgh had poured time, energy, and personal commitment into organizing an evening meant to spotlight causes she deeply cared about. Invitations had been carefully arranged, dignitaries had confirmed attendance, and the event was expected to showcase Sophie's growing influence within the monarchy. For many royal watchers, it was shaping up to be one of the most significant moments in her recent public work. And then the disruptions began. At first, they appeared minor. A vendor unexpectedly withdrew from a key role. A scheduling conflict suddenly appeared for an important guest. A shipment of materials meant for the event was delayed under circumstances that seemed oddly difficult to explain. Individually, these problems could have been dismissed as ordinary logistical complications. But when they started piling up one after another, members of Sophie's team began sensing that something wasn't right. According to the leaked account, the staff member inside Edward's office noticed a pattern forming behind the scenes. Communications between certain palace departments seemed strangely timed. Requests were being rerouted. Approvals that had already been granted were suddenly being reconsidered. What initially looked like bureaucratic confusion slowly began to resemble something more deliberate. Inside palace corridors, confusion quickly turned to concern. Some aides reportedly dismissed the problems as coincidence. Others, however, quietly began asking questions. Why were the obstacles appearing so consistently? And why did they always seem to strike the most critical elements of Sophie's event planning? As the days passed, whispers began circulating among staff who rarely indulged in speculation. Experienced palace employees, individuals accustomed to the rigid professionalism expected within royal operations, found themselves exchanging uneasy glances. Something unusual was happening, and no one seemed willing to say it out loud. But the staff member who had first noticed the strange pattern reportedly could not ignore it any longer. What they believed they had discovered pointed toward a possibility so explosive that even raising it privately could trigger consequences inside the tightly controlled world of royal households. And once that possibility surfaced, the atmosphere inside the palace shifted almost instantly. Shock mixed with disbelief. A handful of insiders allegedly began piecing together fragments of information, each detail adding weight to a claim that seemed almost unthinkable. Because if the leak was accurate, if the disruptions had not been random at all, then someone powerful within the royal structure might have been working quietly to undermine Sophie's moment in the spotlight. But to understand why this alleged sabotage attempt could ignite such tension inside the monarchy, we must first look at the delicate and often overlooked position Sophie has quietly built within the royal family. For years, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, existed quietly within the royal structure, rarely attracting the relentless headlines that followed other members of the monarchy. Yet beneath that calm and almost understated public presence, something powerful was unfolding. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Sophie was transforming into one of the most dependable figures within the royal family. And as that transformation gained momentum, palace insiders began noticing something else: her rising influence was beginning to shift the internal balance of attention and admiration inside the monarchy. Unlike the dramatic controversies that often surround royal figures, Sophie's ascent did not come through spectacle. It came through consistency, through patience, through years of quietly fulfilling duties that many others overlooked. Staff members who worked within royal households often described her in the same way: composed, professional, and remarkably grounded in an environment where pressure could easily overwhelm even the most seasoned figures. Inside palace operations, reputation matters more than public perception. The people who work behind those walls see the long hours, the difficult negotiations, and the emotional strain that accompanies royal responsibilities. And according to multiple insiders, Sophie had built something rare within that system: trust. Not the kind of loyalty that is forced through hierarchy, but the kind that grows when someone consistently proves themselves capable, reliable, and respectful of those around them. Over time, that trust began reaching the highest levels of the royal family. Senior advisors reportedly started recommending Sophie for increasingly important roles within royal engagements. Diplomatic appearances, charity initiatives, and international visits slowly began carrying her name. With each successful event, her reputation strengthened not just among palace staff, but among the public as well. Observers who followed royal engagements began noticing the same pattern. Sophie approached her responsibilities with a calm focus that contrasted sharply with the drama often surrounding other members of the monarchy. Where others attracted controversy, she delivered stability. Where headlines chased scandal, Sophie quietly built credibility. And the public responded. Media coverage surrounding her work gradually shifted from polite acknowledgement to genuine admiration. Commentators praised her dedication. Charities welcomed her involvement with enthusiasm. Even critics of the monarchy found it difficult to question the sincerity of her efforts. Inside palace corridors, however, the implications of that growing admiration did not go unnoticed. Because influence within a royal institution is rarely just about titles. It is about perception, trust, and visibility. And Sophie was quietly gaining all three. Advisors reportedly began discussing her as one of the monarchy's most effective working royals, someone capable of strengthening the institution's image during uncertain times. That growing recognition reached a new level when plans were announced for the major charity event Sophie had been organizing for months. The occasion was not simply another royal engagement. It was designed to highlight causes deeply connected to her personal commitments, while also bringing together influential figures who supported those initiatives. Within palace planning circles, the event was expected to mark a defining moment for the Duchess of Edinburgh. A demonstration of leadership, a showcase of her ability to command attention while maintaining the grace that had defined her public role for years. But with rising influence often comes quiet resistance. Royal institutions are built on delicate hierarchies, and sudden shifts in admiration can sometimes stir tensions that remain hidden from public view. As Sophie's role expanded and her presence within the royal framework grew stronger, subtle whispers reportedly began circulating among palace insiders. Some wondered whether her growing prominence might be unsettling figures accustomed to occupying the center of attention. Others questioned whether the balance of influence inside the royal family was beginning to change in ways few had anticipated. And it was precisely this highly anticipated event, planned for months and carefully coordinated, that suddenly began showing signs of disruption. At first, the problem seemed small: an unexpected scheduling conflict, a missing supplier, a sudden change in guest confirmations. In an operation as large and complicated as a royal event, minor disruptions were nothing unusual. Palace staff were trained to navigate them quietly, efficiently, without drawing attention. But as Sophie's team scrambled to keep the event on track, a disturbing pattern slowly began to emerge. One by one, critical elements of the evening were quietly unraveling. And according to the leaked account, someone within the palace structure appeared to be pulling the strings. Sophie's charity event had been carefully planned for months. Every invitation, every logistical arrangement, every coordination with supporting organizations had been managed with meticulous attention. The evening was designed to spotlight causes that Sophie had championed for years: initiatives tied to humanitarian work, community support, and international advocacy. It wasn't simply another appearance on the royal calendar. For the Duchess of Edinburgh, this event represented something deeper. It was a statement about her role within the modern monarchy, a demonstration that dedication and quiet leadership could carry real influence. That is precisely why the disruptions began raising alarm. The first issue arrived quietly. A scheduling notice appeared suggesting that one of the evening's most important supporters might no longer be able to attend. At first, Sophie's team assumed it was simply a conflict. Royal schedules shift constantly, and adjustments are common. They began rearranging plans, making calls, ensuring the absence would not disrupt the event's flow. But then another complication appeared. A supplier responsible for providing essential materials suddenly withdrew without explanation. The timing made little sense. Contracts had already been confirmed weeks earlier. Staff members began calling contacts, trying to determine what had changed. No clear answer came back. Then a third issue surfaced. Several invitations that had already been approved through palace channels had not reached their intended recipients. Instead, they appeared to have been delayed somewhere within the administrative process. By the time Sophie's team realized the problem, some guests had already made other commitments. At this point, the atmosphere among the planning staff began shifting. Confusion turned into concern. Inside royal operations, precision is everything. The palace runs on layers of coordination that rarely allow for such repeated disruptions. Yet here they were, one after another, each problem affecting a different part of the event's preparation. Individually, they could still be explained away. Together, they began to feel unsettling. Sophie's team continued working tirelessly to correct the problems. Invitations were resent. Alternative vendors were contacted. Staff members worked late into the evening trying to keep the event stable. Yet even as solutions were found, new obstacles seemed to appear almost immediately. Behind closed doors, quiet conversations began circulating among palace employees. Experienced aides, people who had served through countless royal engagements, started asking the same question in hushed tones. Was this really just bad luck? Because the pattern felt deliberate. Certain approvals had been rerouted through unusual channels. Communications between departments appeared oddly timed. Some instructions seemed to originate from offices that normally had no involvement in Sophie's event planning. None of it provided definitive proof of interference. But taken together, the situation began to feel increasingly difficult to dismiss. Within Prince Edward's household, concern started growing. Staff members began reviewing internal communications, trying to understand how so many disruptions could occur simultaneously. And as those reviews unfolded, fragments of information began forming a troubling picture. For the first time, the possibility of internal interference entered the conversation. It was a dangerous thought, one that palace employees rarely allow themselves to consider. But the pattern was becoming too clear to ignore. Someone within the royal system might have been quietly interfering with the event's preparation. Still, no one wanted to speak openly about it. Not yet. Because making such an accusation even privately could send shockwaves through the entire royal household. And most staff members understood the risks of raising suspicions without undeniable evidence. But the most explosive part of the story would only emerge when one insider decided they could no longer stay silent. According to palace sources, the leak didn't come from a journalist chasing a scandal or a rival royal aide eager to ignite drama. It came from someone much closer to the situation, an individual quietly working within Prince Edward's own staff. This person was not a figure accustomed to headlines or controversy. They were part of the internal machinery that keeps royal operations moving with precision and discretion. Yet what this individual allegedly witnessed during the chaotic days leading up to Sophie's event would soon send shockwaves through the palace and potentially expose a calculated attempt to undermine the Duchess of Edinburgh. Within Prince Edward's household, the staff members' responsibilities were routine but crucial. Their role involved coordinating communications, reviewing logistical updates, and ensuring that information moving between royal offices remained organized and accurate. It was the kind of position where details mattered, where patterns could be noticed, and where small irregularities often revealed larger problems hiding beneath the surface. At first, nothing seemed extraordinary. Messages moved through internal channels, event plans were adjusted, confirmations arrived and were logged as usual. But as preparations for Sophie's charity event intensified, the staff member reportedly began noticing something unusual within the communications they were monitoring. Certain instructions appeared oddly timed. Requests were being redirected in ways that did not follow normal procedure. Approvals that had already been granted were suddenly questioned again by offices that had previously shown no involvement in the planning process. Individually, these changes could easily have been explained away as administrative confusion. Royal events involve dozens of departments and countless moving parts. Miscommunication happens. But what troubled the staff member was the consistency of the disruptions and the quiet pattern forming behind them. Messages originating from outside Sophie's immediate team appeared to be influencing decisions that should have remained within her planning structure. Guest lists were subtly altered, schedules shifted without clear explanation, and certain logistical complications seemed to appear immediately after specific communications were circulated. The more the staff member reviewed these messages, the more uneasy they reportedly became. Within Edward's office, a few trusted aides began privately discussing the situation. No one wanted to jump to conclusions. Accusations inside the royal household carry enormous consequences, and even raising suspicions could create tensions that ripple through the entire institution. Yet the questions were becoming harder to ignore. Was Sophie's event simply suffering from unfortunate timing, or was someone quietly interfering? The staff member who had first noticed the irregularities felt the weight of that question more heavily than anyone else, because the communications they had seen seemed to suggest something deeper, something deliberate. Still, speaking up was not an easy decision. Palace culture values loyalty and discretion above almost everything else. Employees are expected to protect the reputation of the monarchy, even when internal disagreements arise. Breaking that code, even in the name of honesty, could mean the end of a career. For days, the staff member reportedly wrestled with that reality. Silence would be safer. Ignoring what they had seen would allow the palace to continue operating without disruption. But each new message that crossed their desk added to a growing sense that something deeply unfair might be happening to Sophie's carefully planned event. Eventually, the pressure became impossible to ignore. Instead of remaining quiet, the staff member made a decision that would change everything. Information about the unusual communications was quietly shared beyond the immediate palace structure. The details were passed along through trusted channels, first to a small circle of individuals who understood the gravity of what was being suggested. Once that information left the protective walls of Edward's office, the situation escalated quickly. Because what the staff member claimed to have uncovered pointed toward a name no one expected to hear connected to the chaos. When the name Queen Camilla allegedly surfaced in connection with the disruptions, disbelief quickly turned into stunned silence among palace insiders. The claim was extraordinary, almost unthinkable within the tightly controlled structure of the monarchy. According to the emerging account, subtle but deliberate actions may have been taken behind the scenes to weaken Sophie's event before it had the chance to succeed. And as whispers moved through the palace, one uncomfortable question began echoing through private offices and quiet corridors. Why would someone so senior risk such a move? At first, the connection appeared only as a fragment buried inside the communications that had raised alarm. Certain scheduling adjustments, according to the leaked information, had originated from offices linked indirectly to Camilla's administrative team. These changes were not obvious or dramatic. They were quiet alterations small enough to avoid immediate suspicion, yet significant enough to disrupt the careful planning surrounding Sophie's event. One by one, palace aides began revisiting the timeline. A guest who had previously confirmed attendance suddenly received an invitation to another engagement scheduled at the same time. Another influential supporter reportedly received mixed communications that created uncertainty about whether their presence at Sophie's event was still expected. Meanwhile, several logistical decisions affecting key suppliers seemed to be routed through channels that typically had no involvement in the Duchess of Edinburgh's planning process. Individually, these developments could still be explained away. Royal households operate within a complex web of departments, each capable of creating administrative confusion without malicious intent. But when staff began reviewing the pattern collectively, a troubling possibility started taking shape. Some insiders quietly suggested that the disruptions might not have been random after all. If those suggestions were true, the implications would be explosive. Within palace culture, rivalries are rarely discussed openly, yet long-standing rumors had occasionally hinted at subtle tensions between Sophie and Camilla. Nothing dramatic, nothing public, But differences in influence, attention, and positioning within the royal hierarchy had sometimes created quiet undercurrents that seasoned observers could sense. Sophie's growing popularity had not gone unnoticed. Her steady rise as one of the monarchy's most respected working royals had earned admiration from both the public and palace staff. And in institutions where visibility and perception shape influence, such changes can quietly shift internal dynamics. That possibility led some aides to begin speculating about motives. Was the alleged interference driven by rivalry, by concerns over shifting influence within the royal structure? Or was it something more complicated, a misunderstanding that had spiraled into suspicion because of unfortunate timing? No one inside the palace wanted to reach conclusions too quickly. Senior staff members began carefully reviewing the communications that had triggered the allegations. They examined message logs, cross-checked scheduling requests, and attempted to trace how certain decisions had moved through the administrative network. The goal was clear: determine whether the disruptions were the result of coincidence or something more deliberate. At the same time, a growing fear began to spread among royal aides. If the story escaped palace walls before the situation could be clarified, it could ignite a public scandal that the monarchy would struggle to contain. Allegations of internal sabotage between senior royals would not simply attract media attention, they could reshape public perception of the royal family itself. Within staff circles, divisions quietly began forming. Some believed the accusations were exaggerated, fueled by speculation rather than evidence. Others felt the pattern was too suspicious to ignore. And caught between those perspectives were advisors desperately trying to keep the situation from escalating into something far more damaging. Yet despite every attempt to control the situation internally, the information was already moving beyond the staff level. Because the true fallout of the leak would only become clear once the details began circulating among the senior royals themselves. As the allegations spread through palace corridors, reactions reportedly ranged from disbelief to quiet alarm. For a royal family already navigating delicate public expectations, the suggestion that one senior royal might attempt to sabotage another's event carried explosive implications. Even the hint of such a conflict threatened to shake the carefully maintained image of unity the monarchy relies on. Within hours, according to insiders, senior aides were moving urgently behind closed doors, attempting to prevent the situation from spiraling into a full-blown royal crisis. The first response came not through public statements, but through hurried internal discussions. Trusted palace staff reportedly gathered in small meetings, speaking in low voices, reviewing fragments of information that had begun circulating among different royal offices. No one wanted to overreact. Yet no one could ignore the potential seriousness of what had been suggested. The monarchy functions on reputation, stability, and the public belief that its senior figures operate with dignity and cooperation. If the accusation proved credible, or even appeared credible, it could damage far more than one event. Almost immediately, attention shifted toward the monarchy's public image. Advisors understood how quickly stories can travel once even a whisper escapes palace walls. A narrative suggesting internal rivalry between senior royals would not simply attract headlines. It would ignite speculation about deeper fractures within the institution. For those responsible for protecting the crown's reputation, that possibility was deeply troubling. At the same time, uncertainty hung heavily over the entire situation. Were the accusations accurate, or had a series of misunderstandings been woven into something far more dramatic than reality? Senior aides began examining every detail that had triggered the allegations. Communications were quietly reviewed. Schedules were rechecked. Advisors attempted to trace how certain logistical disruptions had moved through the palace system. Yet the more they looked, the more complicated the situation seemed to become. Some staff members insisted that the pattern of disruptions was too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Others urged caution, warning that palace rumors have a way of expanding beyond the truth if not carefully contained. The atmosphere grew tense, not because conclusions had been reached, but because no one could yet explain the situation with confidence. Amid this growing uncertainty, pressure mounted to identify the source of the leak itself. Inside royal institutions, information rarely escapes without consequence. Staff members are bound by strict expectations of loyalty and discretion, and the sudden appearance of sensitive allegations outside internal channels raised urgent questions. Who had revealed the information? Why had they chosen to speak? And more importantly, what exactly had they seen that convinced them something was wrong? While advisors attempted to control the situation, word of the controversy reportedly reached Prince Edward and Sophie themselves. The news did not arrive as a dramatic confrontation, but as a cautious briefing, delivered with the careful language palace aides use when discussing matters that could have serious implications. For Edward, the situation carried a particularly uncomfortable dimension. The leak had reportedly emerged from within his own household. That fact alone placed him in a delicate position, caught between loyalty to palace unity and concern for the situation surrounding his wife's event. Among royal advisors, the tension deepened. Some believed the best course of action was immediate containment, resolve the issue quietly, prevent further discussion, and move forward as though nothing had happened. Others feared that silence might allow rumors to grow even more dangerous if the truth eventually surfaced elsewhere. Behind the scenes, communication teams began preparing strategies to control the narrative should journalists begin asking questions. Statements were drafted, then revised, then quietly set aside as advisors debated how much could safely be acknowledged. Because the greatest fear inside the palace was simple. Once the story reached the press, controlling it would become nearly impossible. And yet, while aides struggled to manage the situation, the most emotionally charged moment had not yet arrived. Because the real impact of the allegations would only fully emerge when Sophie herself reportedly learned what had been unfolding behind the scenes. For Sophie, the revelation was reportedly both shocking and deeply personal. The event she had spent months preparing, an initiative meant to spotlight causes close to her heart, had nearly been derailed by forces she never suspected. According to insiders, the Duchess of Edinburgh suddenly found herself facing a choice few people inside the monarchy ever expect to confront. Should she challenge what had allegedly happened behind the scenes, or remain silent while palace officials quietly tried to bury the entire story? For Sophie, this was never just another engagement on the royal calendar. Those who worked closely with her understood how much the event meant. It represented months of careful planning, personal involvement, and genuine commitment to the charities she had chosen to champion. Unlike ceremonial appearances that follow predictable royal routines, this initiative carried Sophie's personal imprint. Every guest invited, every organization represented, every detail had been shaped by her vision. That is why the suggestion that someone might have attempted to undermine it struck such a powerful emotional chord. When the information about the leak reportedly reached her, the reaction inside her inner circle was described as a mixture of disbelief and quiet anger. The idea that an event dedicated to meaningful causes could become entangled in internal palace politics felt deeply unfair. For Sophie, who had spent years building a reputation through patience and professionalism, the moment carried a painful sense of betrayal. Yet those closest to her also understood something else. Sophie was not known for reacting impulsively. Prince Edward reportedly became a steady presence during those tense conversations that followed the revelation. Advisors gathered quietly, discussing the implications of what had been uncovered and the possible consequences of taking action. The situation was delicate. Confronting the allegations directly could ignite a conflict inside the royal family that might spiral far beyond Sophie's event. Remaining silent, however, meant allowing the situation to pass without accountability. For a brief moment, the path forward appeared uncertain. Some advisors suggested addressing the issue privately through internal palace channels, ensuring that the truth could be clarified without public confrontation. Others worried that silence might allow the situation to repeat itself in the future. Each option carried risks. Each choice threatened to pull Sophie deeper into a conflict she had never sought. Yet in the middle of that uncertainty, Sophie reportedly made a decision that surprised many palace observers. Rather than allow the controversy to dominate the moment, she chose to remain focused on the event itself. Despite the disruptions, despite the whispers circulating behind palace walls, Sophie moved forward with the engagement exactly as planned. Her team worked tirelessly to ensure that the evening unfolded smoothly. Invitations were confirmed again. Last-minute adjustments were made. The event continued not as a scandal, but as the meaningful occasion Sophie had always intended it to be. For those who attended, the success of the event carried a quiet symbolism. It demonstrated something that palace insiders had long recognized about the Duchess of Edinburgh. she was not easily shaken. Pressure did not push her toward dramatic reactions. Instead, she relied on composure and determination, allowing her work to speak louder than the chaos surrounding it. That calm response reportedly left many palace observers both impressed and surprised. In a moment when emotions could easily have taken control, Sophie chose restraint. She refused to allow the alleged sabotage to overshadow the causes she had worked so hard to highlight. But even as the event concluded successfully, the tension behind the scenes did not disappear. Because the deeper issue had not been resolved. The allegations still existed. The leak still lingered in quiet conversations among palace staff. And the longer the story remained unresolved, the greater the risk that it could spread far beyond the palace corridors. And so the question that now haunted the royal household became impossible to ignore. Would the leak itself become an even bigger scandal? By the time the allegations began circulating outside palace walls, the royal household found itself facing a dilemma far more dangerous than the original disruption surrounding Sophie's event. What had started as an internal concern was now hovering dangerously close to public exposure. If the story gained traction in the press, it could ignite a media storm portraying the monarchy as fractured from within. And inside the palace, advisors understood a brutal truth. Once such a narrative escapes into the public domain, it becomes almost impossible to control. Behind closed doors, urgency replaced the earlier confusion. Palace communication teams reportedly began working almost immediately, quietly monitoring conversations and scanning for any signs that journalists had begun chasing the story. These teams were no strangers to crisis management. They had handled scandals, rumors, and controversies before. But this situation carried a uniquely uncomfortable edge. It was not simply about reputation, it was about the possibility that the public might begin questioning the unity of the royal family itself. The first priority became simple: prevent the allegations from reaching the press. Advisors began reviewing how the information had escaped the tight structure of palace operations in the first place. Within royal households, communication is carefully controlled. Messages are monitored, information flows through strict channels, and staff members operate under powerful expectations of loyalty and confidentiality. Yet somehow, the story had slipped beyond those safeguards. An internal investigation quietly began taking shape. Senior staff members started retracing the path of the leaked information, examining internal communications and speaking privately with employees who might have been aware of the situation. The goal was not only to understand what had happened, but to identify the individual who had first allowed the allegations to leave palace walls. Inside royal institutions, loyalty is not merely encouraged. It is demanded. The possibility that a staff member had deliberately exposed sensitive information raised serious concerns among advisors. If palace employees began leaking internal disputes, the entire structure of royal discretion could begin to unravel. For that reason, locating the source of the leak quickly became one of the palace's most urgent priorities. At the same time, discussions intensified among senior advisors about how to protect the monarchy's reputation if the story became public. Some believed the best approach would be total silence, refuse to acknowledge the allegations, and allow the story to fade before it could gain traction. Others worried that ignoring the issue might only fuel speculation if reporters eventually uncovered fragments of the story on their own. Meanwhile, outside the palace gates, pressure was already beginning to build. Journalists who follow royal affairs closely had reportedly begun hearing whispers about unusual tensions surrounding Sophie's event. At first, the inquiries were cautious, almost exploratory. But within media circles, curiosity spreads quickly. The mere hint of conflict between senior royals was enough to trigger deeper investigation. Advisors understood the stakes. If the story escalated into headlines suggesting rivalry or sabotage within the royal family, it could overshadow months of carefully managed public messaging. Instead of unity and duty, the narrative could become one of competition and mistrust, a storyline that would captivate the public and place the monarchy under uncomfortable scrutiny. So the palace moved toward a quiet damage control strategy. Communications were tightened. Internal discussions were limited to a small circle of trusted advisors. The goal was simple: contain the situation before speculation could grow beyond their control. Yet despite every attempt to keep the story contained, the deeper question remained impossible to ignore. Whether the allegations were exaggerated, misunderstood, or entirely accurate, the damage may already have been done. The mere suggestion that rivalry could exist at the highest levels of the monarchy carries a powerful effect. For generations, the royal family has carefully presented an image of unity, different personalities, different roles, yet all moving in quiet coordination under the same crown. But the leak surrounding Sophie's event has unsettled that perception. Suddenly, observers are asking questions they had rarely considered before. Because once the idea enters public conversation, it becomes difficult to remove. Royal watchers, commentators, and longtime followers of the monarchy have begun examining every detail with renewed curiosity. Conversations that once focused only on ceremonial appearances or charitable work now drift toward speculation about relationships behind palace walls. The possibility that internal tensions might exist between senior figures has added an entirely new layer of intrigue to the story. And in the middle of that speculation stands Sophie. For many supporters of the monarchy, the Duchess of Edinburgh has emerged from the situation with her reputation stronger than ever. Her calm response during the turmoil surrounding the event, her refusal to let the controversy overshadow the charitable mission she had worked so hard to promote, has quietly impressed both palace insiders and the public. In a moment where conflict could easily have erupted into open confrontation, Sophie chose composure. That decision has only amplified her growing popularity. Across public discussions, many royal supporters now see her as a symbol of steadiness within a royal family that often appears surrounded by drama. Her quiet dedication, once overlooked by the wider public, is now being noticed in ways it never was before. Ironically, the controversy that threatened to disrupt her event may have elevated her standing even further. Yet the situation has also raised complicated questions, particularly about the influence of Queen Camilla within the royal structure. Inside royal commentary circles, discussions have grown increasingly intense. Some observers dismiss the sabotage claims entirely, arguing that palace operations are simply too complex for every disruption to be interpreted as intentional. Others believe the pattern described by the leaked account deserves deeper scrutiny. In institutions where influence operates quietly, they argue, subtle conflicts can sometimes remain hidden for years. The truth, however, remains frustratingly difficult to confirm. Palace officials have offered no direct confirmation of the allegations. Advisors continue to emphasize unity, focusing public attention on royal duties and charitable initiatives rather than internal speculation. Yet the questions raised by the leak have not disappeared. They linger in conversations, in commentary, and in the quiet curiosity of those who follow royal affairs closely. Perhaps the most enduring mystery of all surrounds the staff member who first revealed the story. That individual, whose decision to speak reportedly triggered the entire chain of events, has never been publicly identified. Within the palace, some may view that act as a breach of loyalty. Others may quietly see it as a moment of courage and attempt to expose something they believed was wrong. Either way, their choice changed the narrative. Because even if the full truth behind the alleged sabotage is never confirmed, the story has already altered how people view the inner workings of the monarchy. It has reminded observers that behind the ceremony and tradition lies a human institution, shaped by personalities, ambitions, loyalties, and disagreements just like any other. And as the royal family moves forward, the quiet leak that began with one staff member may continue echoing through palace corridors for years to come.